Welcome, everyone, to Northwest Unitarian Universalist Congregation on this lovely Sunday morning. Welcome from all over. I know there's some of us from Michigan, and I personally am in California, and I know there are others from around the nation. So welcome, and thank you all for being here, old friends and new friends. As I said, we are Northwest Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I am Joshua Berg, the intern minister. And Northwest Unitarian Universalist Congregation is a religious community that challenges us to grow in spirit, knowledge, acceptance, and action. We provide support and warmth in times of need and joy. And our vision is that we will provide opportunities for personal growth, thought, learning, sharing, creativity, and listening. We'll offer a place to explore spirituality. We work towards solutions to social issues. We provide comfort and companionship, and we welcome members as we grow in number and diversity. This morning, we are joined by Star Austin, who is our Director of Religious Education, Ken Hermanot, who is our music director, Alex Myers, who is our pianist, accompanist, and Ben Gable, who is our tech wizard. So welcome all to this space. I am going to chime us in, and then we're going to hear a little ragtime for our prelude, because as you'll see later in the service, I'm going to take us back to the turn of the 20th century, the end of the 1800s. So I thought a little ragtime music would set the tone. So here we go.
This morning, our chalice lighting words come from the Reverend Mary Safford. Oh, friends, if we only be obedient to the heavenly vision that we enjoy today, would only proclaim most earnestly in words and deeds the glad gospel of eternal love, what might we not accomplish during the next few years?
Thank you. And we'll see later Reverend Mary Safford and Eleanor Gordon, who we're going to quote in this service, were part of the Iowa Sisterhood, who were Unitarian ministers at the turn of the 20th century in the Midwest. So one of the ways we build our congregational community is by sharing our greatest joys and deepest sorrows. Thank you all. If you will join me, I'd like to share a few words to offer some wishes and some blessings, and to hold in our hearts the joys and sorrows that we've heard, and the joys and sorrows that we remain unspoken. Spirit of life, unknown divine, human strength that connects us all in ways we understand and ways we don't understand. We are here today celebrating joys and experiencing sorrows. We are grieving for prejudice in this country. We are celebrating renewal as we open up our country and drink our Starbucks. We have conflicting emotions. I only ask that in this time we reach within and look without to find the greater love that connects us in our beloved community and in the greater world, and use that love to find the strength to renew, revigorate, reinvigorate, regenerate our spirits, our souls, our strength in this time of unknown. May we call on that love to do that. May it be so.
May nothing evil cross this door, and may your fortune never cry about these windows. May the roar and rain go by. By faith made strong, the rafters will withstand the battering of the storm. This heart, though all the world grow chill, will keep you warm. Peace shall walk softly through these rooms, touching our lips with holy wine, till every casual corner blooms into a shrine. With laughter drown the raucous shout, and though these sheltering walls are thin, may they be strong to keep paid out and hold love in.
Our reading this morning is Obedience to the Heavenly Vision by the Reverend Mary Safford. But for the loyalty to truth, the heroic self-sacrifice, the unfaltering devotion of those who in loneliness and anguish of soul were true to their convictions in times past, you and I would not enjoy that religious liberty which is our priceless heritage. We must realize our debt to the past, a debt that we cannot pay save by being brave and true and helpful in the present. And we must also think how much we owe to God, who has given us reason, conscience, love, all the wonderful powers of being, not to rust in us unused, but to be employed for the helping of brothers and sisters. Surely, in view of all we have received, we are most ungrateful unless we are doing the very best we can to make some noble return for it. And if there are any here today who rejoice in the great truths of the liberal faith, but are doing nothing to support this faith, let me urge you for your own sake, as well as for the sake of others, no longer to be disobedient unto the heavenly vision. If you have money to give it freely, give it gladly. If silver and gold you have none, give time, give thought, give work, give everything you have the power to give that will strengthen this church and help to make it a beacon light, to storm-tossed souls. If you can do nothing more than simply come to church, be sure to come each Sunday. Come not merely for your own sake, but also for the sake of the noble cause that is strengthened by your presence and your interest. Stay not outside. Ask not, is it a fashionable church? Is it a popular church? Is it a wealthy church? Ask only, is it a church that proves the right to be by the grand truths it proclaims, the good works that it does, the noble lives it helps create? Heed no ignoble questionings about popularity, wealth, or fashion, but obey your heavenly vision. Be loyal to the truth you see, bravely stand by your convictions, and work for the human good. Then life will grow divine.
So today I want to tell you about two radical women And we'll start with the first one. 200 years ago, I'll take you back to meet Antoinette Brown. Now, when Antoinette was a little girl, she loved her faith and she wanted to show her faith and share it with other people and encourage other people to live their faith. She wanted to help people live their faith in their own way. And so she decided to become a minister. But she was told, no, that's impossible. Because in those days, in this country, there were no women ministers. People laughed at her. They discouraged her. They told her she was a fool to give up this idea, but her mother supported her. And one day her mother fashioned a ribbon, a white ribbon on a pin, and pinned it to her dress. And as she touched it, she said, "You can do anything. I believe in you." And Antoinette Brown, she wore this ribbon, and every time she felt discouraged, she would reach up and touch the ribbon and remember her mother's faith in her and her mother's commitment to her. She would remember that she had the support of her family. And there were a lot of obstacles. Antoinette's family couldn't afford to send her to college, and she touched the white ribbon. She found a job. She probably had some dogs who barked in the middle of her trying to preach. She would touch the ribbon. She couldn't afford to go to college. And she said, I'm going to get a job. And so she found a job. She worked for 3 years until she could pay for college herself. And then she went to Oberlin College. Now, this was the first college in the United States to admit women or African Americans. Oberlin was proud to support people that other colleges said weren't worthy of going to college. But when Antoinette asked to enter the program to become a minister, Oberlin College said, "No, that's impossible." Now, I bet Antoinette touched the white ribbon then. She did not back down. Eventually, she entered the program, but once her studies were done, Oberlin refused to give her her degree. So she did all the work to become a minister, but they wouldn't give her the degree so that she could call herself a minister. But she found other people who supported her, friends who invited her to speak in public and in churches, and she gave speeches for women's rights and other social justice causes, and she inspired and supported people even without being in a church. 17 years after her mother had first penned that white ribbon on her shirt or on her dress, in 1853, Antoinette was ordained. It's believed that she was the first woman in the United States to be ordained as a minister. Now, she was a minister of a Congregationalist church, but eventually she left that church and became a Unitarian minister. So Antoinette Brown is one of our faith ancestors. Now, she liked to give speeches in college. She remembered the obstacles she had faced to become a minister, and she wanted to support other young women in their goals. And especially when other people told those women, "No, what you want to do is impossible," Antoinette Brown told them they can do it. She encouraged the women who came after her. And one time, a young student invited Reverend Antoinette Brown to speak at Antioch College, and the student's name was Olympia Brown. They shared the same last name, but they weren't related to each other. Olympia had never heard a woman minister before. And she told Antoinette, "I want to be a minister too." And like Antoinette, she wanted to live by her faith to make the world a better place for all people. But Olympia had not been sure that women could become a minister because when she had asked, she had been told, "No, that's impossible." And the story goes that Antoinette Brown gave Olivia Brown a white ribbon. And maybe she told her, "You can do it. I believe in you." And she did do it. Olympia faced a lot of obstacles as well. All through school, she had a stutter. And when she would take her courses to learn to craft sermons, everyone would make fun of her. And they also thought she was a bit odd because it is told that she would go out into the yard and talk to trees. She would practice her sermons over and over and over again until she could do them without the stutter. And she did this by talking to the trees. So people thought she was strange. They didn't like the way she spoke. She was a woman. Lots of people stood in her way. But she was ordained in 1863 as a Universalist minister, the first woman to become a Universalist minister. Now, these two women were some of the first women ministers in our country. They're our faith ancestors. And like us, they had great hopes for the future. They accepted the mantle of faithful leadership. When we show our faith to others, When we make the commitment, as Reverend Mary Safford's reading told us, to come to church every Sunday, we are honoring the legacy of women who wanted nothing more than to spread this good news, this good faith of liberal religious faith, Unitarianism and Universalism. We honor that with our commitments to our Unitarian Universalist faith. We honor that to our commitment to community, to showing up, and to supporting one another and the future generation. We stand on the shoulders of these fierce and radical women who 200 years ago said, "You're telling me no, but I know in my heart what I am called to do. I know what I'm committed to." And they saw their commitments through. We are the descendants of a radical and beautiful people. Let us not forget it. And let us now turn our hearts to song as we enjoy hymn number 77.
Seek not afar for beauty, lo, it grows in dew and grasses all about your feet, in birds, in sunshine, childish faces sweet, in stars and mountains, summits topped with snows. Go not abroad for happiness, behold, it is a flower blooming at your door. Bring love and laughter home and evermore. Joy shall be yours as changing years unfold. In wonder workings for some bush of flame, we look for truth and fancy it concealed. But in earth's common things it stands revealed, while grass and flowers and stars spell out the name.
I too would like to take you on a sensory journey back to the end of the 19th century. Starr talked about the first woman Universalist minister, and I'm going to talk about the first women Unitarian ministers. So I'm going to take you on this sensory journey back to the end of the 19th century. Let's place ourselves first in a home, standing in seas of cornfields. Leaves can be heard rustling in the early morning breeze, and there's this familiar bouquet of livestock mingling with the odor of ripening sweet corn. So imagine an older, once colorful Victorian house. It has a big porch, ornate moldings, wooden columns that are now worn from years of winter storms and piercing summer rays. We join in this home an archetypal white woman Unitarian minister. Sitting inside in her favorite chair, she is one of the first women of either the Unitarian or Universalist denominations to ever be ordained. She and her sister Unitarian ministers, known as the Iowa Sisterhood, are spreading Unitarianism throughout the rural Midwest, even in Kalamazoo here in Michigan. In fact, it was so common at the end of the 1800s to have a female minister in the Midwest that a child was heard in the pews in one church commenting on a visiting preacher in total surprise. And he said, "Mommy, look, there's a man preacher." As this minister shifts in her chair in her home, she anticipates the faithful creak from generations of usage, and she wonders how the wood holding her hand can feel so smooth, and she mourns the loose threads and the faded pastels of the needlepoint adorned upholstery on the chair. And then the morning sun, it streams in, warming her as it reawakens the musty odors of home and hearth. And her spirit, it's elevated by the colors from the stained glass of an Art Nouveau clerestory window she has. The refracted sunlight through the window is some otherworldly, yet also very familiar, diluted purple hue. And she remembers, imagining this color, this light, as an angel's eyes when she was a child in the pews of her parents' church. This particular window now was given to her by her own congregation in honor of service when they built a new modern church home. So she gathers the energy of the angel's light and she rises as sweat draws down her back, connecting her to her own body deep below the multiple laminations of heavy velvet. And she straightens her clothes and she walks to the door, opens it, and is immediately gifted with the minty oregano scent of wild bergamot growing in the yard. And she's suddenly realizing the ethereal purple from that stained glass window. It matches almost exactly the lavender bloom of the bergamot. This is a Sunday morning in the Midwest territory of a young America right before the turn of the 20th century. Now, in the urban centers of the East, in Boston, transformed by the Industrial Revolution, Unitarianism is led entirely by males. Here, in the yet unsettled rural expanses of the American frontier, it is women ministers who are doing the arduous work of spreading the faith. Without commensurate remuneration or recognition, they are guided, as Starr said, by their values, their Unitarian values, and motivated by the promise of the heavenly vision of liberal religion. Another of her sisters, Reverend Mary Safford, who we heard today, the founder of the Iowa Sisterhood, was succinct when she wrote what we heard: the liberal church today is to be obedient to its heavenly vision. Not only must we proclaim the saving truths we hold, but we must also strive to build up these truths in our own lives and in the lives of others. The minister we are imagining in her home surprises herself now with a long sigh as she breathes out the work week. And she steps through the portico of her home, reset, enlivened, anticipating her charge to feed the spirits of her flock with worship of what their newly adopted Unitarian statement of faith named the love with which our souls commune. Today, that same love is restated as the interdependent web of all existence in our principles. And in order to worship this love, it serves us well to commune with those souls of our ancestors who sowed the seeds for our faith's growth, literally and figuratively. According to their statement of faith, they believed that reason and conscience are final authorities in matters of religious belief. They believe that to love the good and to live the good is the supreme thing in religion, counting nothing good for self that is not good for all. And as previously stated, they worshiped one and all that love with which our souls commune. As I said, these same sentiments align with our current Unitarian Universalist principles. And if we also align with the spirit of strength, courage, and perseverance of the likes of the Reverends Olympia Brown, of the Reverends Mary Safford, Caroline Bartlett Crane, Florence Buck, Marion Murdoch, Eleanor Gordon, all of the Iowa Sisterhood, we too can cultivate new sacred territory. Now, in the 21st century, for me at least, and likely others, ancestors are imagined through such distance, that it renders them practically unrelatable. And the truth is, however, as we rise in our own homes, just as this minister did, we are them and they are us. I am this preacher whose sage words will nourish her congregation. You are the congregant and the lay leader who works against all odds to support our beloved faith as the country grows. We are all just as human as these intrepid prophetesses. And only with that feeling, that sensation, that understanding, can we embody the lessons they brought forward. We feel the very same mundane humanity the Iowa Sisterhood felt leaving their homes. There is overwhelm. There's excitement anticipating the mighty spirit work to be done. And connecting directly into this minister's home, relating on this corporeal level, realizing they had challenges as well, that they were fallible too. They faced each new day just as we do. This connection facilitates an ability to travel with them in spirit. It enables us to know that if they did the work they did, we too have the capacity to do the work that must be done. Now, it may seem that our struggles are very different than the Iowa Sisterhood, but certain struggles we still confront over a century later. They too dealt with sexism, for instance. They led congregations, yet they did not have the right to vote for reason of their gender. The day this particular minister left for worship, it was only a few years following Supreme Court rulings in the 1880s legalizing segregation, slavery in yet another incarnation, despite the 13th Amendment and the Emancipation Proclamation, and perpetuating America's long-established caste system. At the very moment this minister anticipated that first hymn of her beloved worship, the Code of Indian Offenses forbade Indigenous Americans from practicing their religion at all. And though progress has been made, the 21st century reels from the repercussions of years of prejudice and marginalization. And the system that systematically and systemically dehumanized our fellow Americans remains insidiously transformed. Now, there was also at that time a sense of excitement and adventure. This sense of excitement and adventure as these women built a growing faith and a growing nation at the turn of the century, that sense may also seem very distant. But we still can tap into that same sense of adventure and excitement. We can. Just as the Iowa Sisterhood confronted the physical frontier with the charge to tenaciously build homesteads of Unitarian faith as they envisioned them, we too, right now, are setting out into an unknown expanse. It is one with as much risk of danger, yet also just as much or more fertile soil on which to support life and foster love. Between 1880 and 1930, the 21 women of the Iowa Sisterhood changed the course of Unitarianism by building welcoming churches and promoting a theology of universal love and justice that demanded freedom for all. And they moved the needle. If we harness the tenacity of the Iowa Sisterhood, we can move the needle even further. We can shepherd our faith into a future that will see our country and Unitarian Universalism grow and prosper, transformed by breeding liberation for all. Finally, there is a much more sobering lesson in this story. After the Iowa Sisterhood tamed the feral wilderness of the Midwest for decades, the denominational leaders in the East pilfered their gains and squandered their talents. Imagine again now this same minister rising in her home on a Sunday, now 20 years later, in the early 1900s. Now, the bergamot in her yard still blooms, yet it fails to uplift her spirit. She's now climbing into a Model T, a horseless carriage, and she's wearing a 1920s cloche hat and a much lighter dress, but she's also wearing a much heavier heart, because she is keenly aware that the country's ills are being blamed on cultural emasculation, and especially within the Unitarian denomination, there's a growing desire to regain a supposed lost virility to prevent any further adverse impact from feminism. She would know that Sam Elliott, the president of the American Unitarian Association, handpicked a man, W.C. Backus, to represent their interests in the West, who was opposed to filling vacancies with women ministers. So rather than support the women ministers who single-handedly built the faith in the Midwest, the Eastern leadership drove out these most valuable propagators of Unitarianism in an effort to make the faith more manly. Now, there were still men of
Jenkins
rank who supported the Iowa Sisterhood, like Jenkins Lloyd Jenkins, Jenkins Lloyd Jones was actually an uncle of Frank Lloyd Wright, and he worked tirelessly on their behalf. But these men were also being driven out. Consequently, the Iowa Sisterhood redirected their passion for justice through faith away from the Unitarian Church. Now, they continued their theologically supported work for freedom and love and justice, eventually helping to achieve significant legislative and societal reform. Only now, they did so without the continued support and in spite of new obstacles presented by the very faith that benefited for decades from their selfless toil. The men in control in Boston and the status quo were challenged, and Unitarian leadership in the East reacted, fearing change. Imagine if Boston Unitarianism had lifted up these courageous ministers rather than dismissing them. I think we can agree that Unitarianism would have been an even stronger and more diverse faith. For Unitarian Universalism to grow and thrive, we today cannot make these same mistakes. As a faith community, we must nurture and promote those leading us in transformative change, regardless of how it challenges tradition and those of us with privilege. The work that frees us all will also put many ill at ease. We, those of us with privilege specifically, must lose our fragility and nurture all ministries that persevere in the face of the difficult and painful process of bending along with the arc of the moral universe. And this is not to say that the white people and men are not wanted, needed, or cannot be leaders of our faith. They are, and they can. But it is to say that the Unitarian Universalist faith needs every one of us of all genders and social locations as true equals. And that requires opening space so that the modern day incarnation of the Iowa Sisterhood can take their rightful place as equals. Further, I believe we can all be that 21st century transformers doing the unrelenting work of liberation through faith. All of us. No, we're not all ordained ministers or eloquent orators or skilled organizers and managers, shepherds of congregational growth. And we are diverse from assorted social locations with various lived experiences and levels of privilege. However, since our collective Unitarian Universalist theology being one of the priesthood of all believers means that regardless of how we identify or our individual talents, we are all ministers. It's just for us to attend to our inspiration, where our personal ministry lives. Now, yes, we're still a predominantly white faith, swimming in the culture we have inherited, the legacy of hundreds of years of white supremacy, with all the prejudice and inequity that that brings. The transformative change that manifested as the female ministry of the Iowa Sisterhood, challenging the patriarchy in the East, it now takes the form of the vital anti-racist and other liberationist ministries challenging oppression that is both intentional and unintentional, overt and covert. Unitarian Universalism in the 21st century will only succeed by supporting the myriad of anti-racist, anti-bigotry ministries and all the inspired transformative ministries wherever and however they exist. As a denomination, we are the ministers with marginalized identities on the pulpit, in the pews, participating in small group spaces and occupying every corner of our organization, taking the lead, and in front of our organization, taking the lead in dismantling white supremacy culture. As a denomination, we are also the white allies, harnessing our privilege to support that effort in various ways. As a denomination, we are the committee members who fight for initiatives against all odds. We are the board governors who shape the mission, guided by a combination of fiscal responsibility and liberation theology. We are the community ministers that treat our earth with no less love than we have for our own children. We are the youth who will tolerate nothing less than a truly equitable society. We are congregants from all backgrounds who believe in the liberating power of sacred worship and ritual. We are all, every one of us, in our own way, the spreaders of our faith. Today, fortunately, our Unitarian Universalist Association leadership is supporting courageous action toward liberation. And therefore, as members of the faith, our charge is to follow their lead. They give us guidance with our Eighth Principle Project, which we'll be working on at Northwest. They give us guidance with the report, Widening the Circle of Concern, and other amazing initiatives. Our beloved Unitarian Universalism can realize Reverend Mary Safford's call to be obedient to the heavenly vision of liberal religion, a call to which the Iowa Sisterhood dedicated their lives. If we are obedient to the earthly vision to which we dedicate our lives today. Now, back in 1889, this minister boards her carriage, excited and happy and anticipatory, again bound for her church, where she will build our denomination. As Starr said, honor her struggle and her accomplishments as you too rise to proclaim the saving truths we hold and build up these truths in your life and in the lives of others. If we promote and nurture the ministries that uplift us, the ministries that challenge us, and the ministries that liberate us, we can lead the world into an equitable future of love with which all souls can indeed commune. And I'd like to now lift up one of our beloved ancestors who we lost recently, a prophetess of Unitarian Universalism. In our next reading, Elandria Williams. She will read her poem, We Are Worthy.
Hi, my name is Elandria Williams, a longtime member of Tennessee Valley UU Church, and I'm happy to share a poem with you I wrote called We Are Worthy. We are worthy, not because of what we produce, but because of who we are. We are divine bodies of light and darkness. You are not worthy because of what you offer, not because of what is in your mind, not for the support you give others, nor what you give at all. We are worthy and whole just because. In this great turning, in this great pandemic, in this radical readjustment and realignment, we are not disposable, we are needed. We are the very people that have withstood everything that has been thrown at us. And as Maya Angelou would say, still I rise. We arise from the pain. We rise from the grief. We rise from the limits people put on us and the limits we place on ourselves. We rise to be the children and the ancestors. We rise to be our true selves in relationship to our families and communities, recognizing our liberating and whole selves, honoring them and others as we strive for abundant communities, abundant lives, abundant relationships, and abundant values and cultural manifestations. You are worthiness personified. I, you, and we are worthy and desire a life where we are not fighting for our very existence. Imagine what we create if we were not always in the struggle. Imagine what we could envision if we were just allowed and just let be to go there. So tired of always having to resist, to fight, demanding, and pushing. To everyone that has the courage, the power, the ability to co-create what we want and need while rooting in what we cannot lose and who we are. You are the visionary. You are the hope. You are our ancestors' dreams. No, you might not ever end up on a list somewhere, but you are on a list in someone's heart and mind. And it's how you move in the world so people can see by example. You are the embodiment of what we need. The embodiment not of productivity, but the embodiment of radical love, care, and sanctuary. It's time, embodiment time. Embodiment. Living one's values out loud. Let me every day live my values out loud. Let us every day live our values out loud. Embodying our values, not the productivity quotient, beyond productivity, past productivity, true embodiment, life.
I'm just going to shortly say that we all stand in the long line of succession. These are words from Eleanor Gordon, and claim as our own all that we are worthy to have and to hold. I don't want to read more because I'd actually like to end with Elandria's words resonating in your minds rather than my own. Elandria, may you rest in love, and we will blow out the chalice. Thank you for that wonderful postlude. And now I welcome you all into breakout rooms to talk about what inspires you. What is your ministry?